Hi, and thanks for joining in with this, the main presentation, which follows the reading, and will be followed by a supplementary set of thoughts if you want to follow them as well. I'd like to share with you something from one of the parables of Jesus, an unusual one in a number of ways. It's very short, doesn't really have much story, and the real pizzazz is in the setting it's in and the drama around the parable itself. But let me share it with you. I'd like to end that really with a look at the whole meaning of life, the universe, and everything. And along the way, we'll let Luke throw in a 2,000-year-old joke, which you just might not have spotted when reading it, which is to be found. That reading is in Luke chapter 7. Let's start with the setting, though, because it is a bit unusual and it can be hard to visualize. The setting is a private home. It's quite a large and significant one in the community, and it's owned by one Simon the Pharisee, who belongs to this group of quite, what should we call them, sort of religious purists, fairly well known for being a bit opinionated, quite often in conflict with Jesus, though there's no hint of that actual open conflict right here. The setting is a mealtime. And Jesus is one of the guests. That's maybe a little unexpected because of the tendency for there to be tension between the Pharisees and Jesus. But there he is. People did not sit upright at the table. I'm sitting upright at my desk to record this. They reclined to eat with their head towards a low table with the main dishes on and their feet sticking out behind them. That's important for the action. People from the community would come and go quite freely during the course of the meal. If you're in the UK and many other Western settings, you'd kind of be a bit surprised by that sort of open house thing, but it has to do with Simon's quite elevated role in his local community. And into this lion's den of disapproval comes a woman described as having lived or living a sinful life in the town. And the implication for us, I'm sure, is that we're meant to understand her to be a sex worker. She comes on a mission to show her appreciation for Jesus by offering him some sort of cosmetic perfume, which would have been an anointing to the head. She becomes overwhelmed with her own emotion, begins to cry as she stands at his feet, and her tears fall on his feet. She feels awkward about that, perhaps, and so she does a socially big no-no, and she lets down her hair and turns it into a towel to wipe her feet, and then anoints his feet with the perfume that she's brought. Her dominant emotion is clearly an overwhelming sense of gratitude and of love in its best sense. But I see her, I wonder if you would agree with me, read it again maybe and see if you agree, but I think I see in her a person who's quite conflicted. The dominant emotion is gratitude, but it's not the only emotion. I think that she is somebody who has experienced the grace of God somehow in Jesus. We're not given the backstory as to how that happened. We're taken straight into the scene where the parable is shared. So we don't know how she came to meet Jesus or discover God's grace through him. Just that she has, and she comes in. But the gratitude and acceptance that she's experiencing, I think, is in conflict with her upbringing and with the religion that she's been taught to have, her understanding of God. And I just want to pause on that very briefly as we go. It's not the main point at all, but you see, I'm bothered that so many Christians feel bad about being conflicted in their faith. In fact, lots won't talk about their faith because they feel they haven't got all the answers. In fact, they're quite worried deep down that their faith doesn't seem to add up properly. Well, folks, there is no human discipline going on the planet right now. where all the facts and the elements add up properly. What scientist, for example, studies the neat bits of science? It would be a waste of time. You research the uncertainty, you research the ragged edges, you research the areas where there's conflict of understanding in order to address those things. There isn't an all wrapped up discipline anywhere on the planet, least of all your personal faith. So don't wait to talk about it until you got it all worked out, and don't wait to feel acceptable to God until you got it all worked out, and don't wait to feel acceptable to yourself, because getting it all worked out ain't going to happen. A conflicted faith is a normal faith and quite a healthy one. Don't worry about it at all. Anyway, on to the main action into which the parable is told. Simon the Pharisee, watches what happens in his house with his guest, who seems to Simon, Jesus, to completely fail to discern what kind of person it is who is currently touching him in this over-familiar way. And Simon's thought is, well, if he really were from God or speaking from God, he would have the understanding, the insight, the discernment to know what kind of woman this is. And here's Luke's joke. Jesus looks at Simon and says, so let me tell you what kind of person you are that is busy thinking I don't see who people are. Let me tell you your thoughts, since you think I can't see hers. And so Luke sort of tells it in such a way that we see the tables completely turned on Simon the Pharisee. And Jesus goes on to make a point. If I can eat in your place, Simon, I can certainly allow her to touch me. And he makes it through this, rather uninteresting parable in a way. But I say uninteresting only because you compare it to some of the big parables, some of the big story parables that grip you. What grips us here is this woman's emotions and this situation with this self-righteous Pharisee, and how Jesus takes to himself her position of shame and lines himself up, allies himself with her, not with the good moral keeping guy, Simon, but with this woman who everybody looks down on and rejects. The story is very, very simple. There are two people, they've been lent money, and the person who lent them the money cancels both debts. Well, one of them owes the money lender slightly more than a year's average salary. So if you're watching this in the UK, average salary comes out, say, 30 grand or something. That's a bit below the average salary. So 30 grand. And he releases him completely from owing him 30 grand. And another person is also released from the debt, but that's about a month's earnings, say 3 grand, something like that. And Jesus says to Simon, so who's going to feel the greater appreciation? Who's going to love the lender the most? And Simon's logic, which is faultless, says, well, presumably the person who's been forgiven the most. And then Jesus takes Simon's own reasoning and then turns it, as it were, against him. Simon is the guy here who doesn't think he owes very much to God. He owes him, to live a moral life and all that stuff. But he doesn't think he's got an awful lot to be forgiven. And he's disapproving of the woman that he sees having loads to be forgiven. So without undoing Simon's own worldview immediately, Jesus says, well, even in your worldview, if she is forgiven, then she's going to love God more than you do, Simon, right? And Simon is trapped by his own reasoning. Jesus has taken her side and has now lifted her up. This is the work of a saviour. This kind of allying himself with those who are disapproved of and rejected will take him all the way to the cross, and it will lay the pattern for disciples and the church to follow. Simon is the guy who holds all the power in this scene. He holds the moral power, and in their society, holding moral and religious power meant that you held great social power. That's a little hard to follow in the UK, but in very many societies now, it's true that people who have religious status and live approved lives hold tremendous social sway. In all groups, irrespective of what they are, what they believe, what they stand for, in all groups you need approval. Approval brings you acceptance, acceptance gives you belonging, and great acceptance will give you status. Disapproval is a curse in a group. Disapproval brings you rejection, and with that rejection, the insecurities that go with isolation and the fears that go with that. You become at risk of exclusion or even excluded. So disapproval is a very, very powerful tool in the hands of those in religious systems and moral systems that hold the power of disapproval, or at least think they do. If the group you belong to, or want to belong to, or need to belong to, represents to you your relationship to God as well, the power is very, very powerful indeed. Quite simply, guys, never buy in to the game of disapproval and approval. It's a fraud. Everyone loses. Jesus torpedoes it. Simon, you're going to lose this game just because you appear to be riding on the top of it, and because you're using all your power of disapproval to keep your status and keep your power and keep people below you and in somewhat in awe of you and perhaps in fear of you. Don't think it's winning you anything, because it really isn't. It's going to disappoint you dreadfully. Instead, abandon the approval-disapproval game. Never play it as a winner or as a loser. Makes no difference. Never, never buy into it. It's a complete con. You are worth far more than any approval rating given you by the ignorant. And anybody who gives you a moral approval rating or a religious approval rating is showing their own ignorance. The universe that you're part of was called into being, and indeed the system that the universe may be part of, all being called into being by God. The processes of the universe, from the basic fundamentals of physics to the diversities in biology, all these principles around which the universe works have been called into being. All these processes are called to exist. That's what we mean by calling it a creation. And you are part of that creation, and a very specific part. Trillions and trillions of steps have been taken to arrive at you being you. And at each of those steps, or most of them, there are any number of alternative possibilities, but it's you that's been called into existence. You are worth more. As this woman was to find out that day, she was worth more, and Simon is worth more than the silly game of who's approved and who's not approved. The issue isn't that at all, it's who's loved. And the answer is, you are. And you're not authorised to disapprove of anybody, you're just authorised to love them. And so, don't buy the game, break free of it, as Jesus brought that woman that day to break free of the approval-disapproval game. And she walked out of there in peace and healed and restored and whole. We never find out what Simon made of it all, or anybody else. They just asked a question, whoa, who is this who even forgives sins? But you're getting the answer just by reading the passage and just by understanding who it is who's come to tell you, don't play the games. Don't put other people through it. Don't let them put you through it either. Just know that you are loved and you are valued and you are forgiven. And that is the gift that Jesus came into the world to give us all. So God bless you. Have a good, safe week. I haven't mentioned COVID, so perhaps I better not. Um, and if you want to just explore any of this stuff a little bit further, do feel free to watch the supplementary message as well. Thanks.